process after Kavanaugh. If you want to vet the nominee, you can. If you want to delay things for the next election, you will not. If you try to destroy somebody, you will not get away with it. Jeff is leaving. He has wrestled with this. He is trying to be fair. I cannot tell you, Jeff, what happened 35 years ago. I can tell you this, that through any legal system, this thing would not get out of the batter's box, and that everything I know about Judge Kavanaugh screams that this didn't happen, and all the other things. So, to my good friends on the other side who are struggling, I think an FBI investigation is going to do nothing. It's not going to tell you any more than we know now. It's going to just keep it going and going and going till he breaks and he won't, and till the next 5 come forward. I'm going to vote yes. And I'm going to tell his 2 daughters that I'm proud of your dad, and I really, really believe he's a good man. And I'm going to tell Dr. Ford, I am sorry you had to go through this too.
Senator Durbin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thursday was an historic day in a Senate committee with more than its fair share of history. In our deliberations over the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh to fill the vacancy on the Supreme Court, we have confronted some of the most serious charges ever leveled against a nominee. Those charges were made at a moment in our nation's history when we are living through a cultural revolution. Women in America are not only emerging into more and more positions of responsibility, they are now airing grievances over sexual harassment and abuse at every level of society. Caught in the vortex of this cultural shift, there is not a person in this room who can truly measure the trajectory or ultimate outcome of this historic change. America is marching forward in the pursuit of justice for women in this country. Sadly, many on the Senate Judiciary Committee are still mired in the dead space it was 27 years ago during the Clarence Thomas nomination hearing. Yesterday in this room, America saw this inflammatory issue in real time, in real life. Dr. Christine Blasey Ford was credible, cooperative, and resolute. When I asked her directly, under oath, the degree of certainty that she had that she was assaulted by Brett Kavanaugh, she responded 100%. When the prosecutor on the Republican side tried to weave a political conspiracy or make her a tool of her lawyers, it fell flat. This woman, who had identified Brett Kavanaugh as her assailant to her husband and therapist 6 years ago, believed she had a responsibility as a citizen to come forward and tell her story. I thought about the words she used during the course of her testimony yesterday. The word she used more often than not to describe her motives was helpful. Helpful. She wanted to be helpful to this committee and to her nation. I believe her. But she was afraid in awakening those carefully guarded and painful memories, and she was afraid for her family. She confided in our colleague Dianne Feinstein with the clear understanding that Dianne would protect her identity, and I have no doubt that Dianne accepted that responsibility and kept her word. Yesterday, 2 members of this committee leveled personal attacks at Senator Feinstein. They said she concealed Dr. Ford's letter for partisan reasons, and one went so far as to say that she leaked the contents of that letter, or her staff leaked that letter, to the press. Perhaps in this Trumpian era, those sorts of baseless personal charges are to be expected. But if we descend to this level of political discourse, we will have forsaken the traditions of the Senate and the comedy which is essential to our public service. And for the record, this baseless claim was refuted immediately by The Intercept, which was first to publish the story about Dr. Ford's allegation. Their reporter said last night, and I quote, "Feinstein's staff did not leak the letter to The Intercept." Yesterday, Dr. Ford made the personal decision to tell her story publicly. She came before this committee under oath and volunteered to answer every question. None of the Republicans on this committee were willing to question or confront her, not one. They sat silent as their prosecutor, Miss Mitchell, tried to do their work. But after Dr. Ford completed her testimony and left the building, it was a different story. Last night on a TV show, one senator said, and I quote, "Miss Ford has got a problem, and destroying Judge Kavanaugh's life won't fix her problem." How could you listen to her honest and direct testimony and draw that conclusion? Judge Kavanaugh's opening statement yesterday was filled with raw emotion. Looking at his family and friends gathered to support him, one could not help but feel, as our colleague Senator Flake reminded us, that this undertaking is deeply personal and there's humanity to reconcile on both sides of the ledger. I could feel the intensity of what he has experienced over the last few weeks, but I could not understand how Judge Kavanaugh could say that he, quote, "bore no ill will towards Dr. Ford," then called her charges, quote, "a calculated, orchestrated political hit," citing, quote, "apparent pent-up anger about President Trump and his 2016 election," and, quote, "revenge on behalf of the Clintons." Revenge on behalf of the Clintons. This lock-her-up grace note in Judge Kavanaugh's remarks may have raised a cheer in the White House, but it's a sad moment in the history of this committee. The exchange I had with Judge Kavanaugh was an honest effort to loose the Gordian knot this committee faces when two sworn witnesses are in direct contradiction. What I asked for, what many have asked for, is obvious. Turn over the facts we know to the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Let them connect the dots. Let them complete the investigation. Then let us meet and evaluate their findings. Do you remember yesterday when on several occasions the Republicans made a point of quoting the American Bar Association? Mr. Chairman, I would like permission to enter into the record a letter sent to this committee on September 27, 2018 by the American Bar Association.
Without objection, it'll be entered.
Let me read it. This is what the committee received. The American Bar Association urges the Senate Judiciary Committee, and as appropriate, the full Senate, to conduct a confirmation vote on Judge Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court of the United States only after an appropriate background check into the allegations made by Professor Ford and others is completed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We make this request because of the ABA's respect for the rule of law and due process under law. The basic principles that underscore the Senate's constitutional duty of advice and consent on federal judicial nominees require nothing less than a careful examination of the accusations and facts by the FBI. Each appointment to our nation's highest court, as with all others, is simply too important to rush to a vote. Deciding to proceed without conducting additional investigation would not only have a lasting impact on the Senate's reputation, but it will also negatively affect the great trust necessary for the American people to have in the Supreme Court. It must remain an institution that will reliably follow the law and not politics. Respectfully, the Senate should recognize that a thorough FBI investigation will demonstrate its commitment to a Supreme Court that is above reproach. That letter was signed by Robert Carlson, President of the American Bar Association. All the quotes yesterday about the ABA's finding on Judge Kavanaugh are a distant second to what we've been asked by the same organization to do, and it is not an unreasonable request. So who is telling the truth? Two sworn witnesses in direct contradiction. But there is one significant difference. One of these sworn witnesses has stepped forward and said, "I will submit my testimony and myself to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, understanding that anyone who lies to the Federal Bureau of Investigation is subject to criminal prosecution." The other witness evaded that question over and over and over. "Oh, I'll leave it up to the committee. It's up to the chairman. You're going to have to decide on that. You make that decision." Judge Kavanaugh knows better. He knows that if he had turned yesterday to the White House counsel and says, suspend this until we have an FBI investigation to clear my name, my reputation, and my nomination to this court. It was the right thing to do. Because those scales had been tipped in favor of the one sworn witness who is willing to take her case before the Federal Bureau of Investigation, I will be voting no on the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court.
Before I call on Senator Cornyn, since the ABA letter came up, I have this comment that the president of the ABA called for an FBI investigation, as you just heard, and to do it before a vote. I've explained many times another FBI investigation is not necessary. The ABA is an outside organization like any other that can send us letters and share their advice, but we're not going to let them dictate our committee's business. Also, this letter is from the president of the ABA, one individual. He doesn't represent the hundreds of thousands of lawyers in the United States. It isn't at all clear that the ABA president has authority to speak for the organization on this matter. This letter doesn't say that he conferred with anyone else or that he convened the Judicial Qualification Committee by conference call or otherwise. The ABA president's opinion doesn't alter the fact that Judge Kavanaugh received a very well qualified rating from the ABA Standing Committee on the Federal Judiciary, and the Standing Committee did not join this letter. Senator Cornyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've said before that I believe that in considering Dr. Ford's testimony, we should treat her the same way I would want my wife, my daughters, or my mother treated if they were in similar circumstances. Conversely, I want to make sure we treat Judge Kavanaugh the same way we would treat my father, my brother, or a son. We owe that to both Judge Kavanaugh and to Dr. Ford. It is simply false to say that somehow we have, in drawing attention to the fact that this has been an orchestrated effort to delay the vote on this nomination, that we have somehow been disrespectful of Dr. Ford. I'm proud of the way this committee treated Dr. Ford yesterday. I thought it was appropriate, dignified, and apparently our friends across the aisle are somehow upset that we got a trained lawyer who handles claims like this on a daily basis to handle it in a thoughtful, appropriate way to elicit facts and information from Dr. Ford. I thought Ms. Mitchell did a good job. But to somehow wrap themselves in the normal compassion we would somehow, that we do feel for somebody in Dr. Ford's situation, and claim that we are not treating her well by pointing out the overt politicalization of this process, is simply trying to take our eye off the ball. There has been a calculated effort to manipulate this process in a way that is blatantly unfair to Dr. Ford and to Judge Kavanaugh, and that's shameful. I said yesterday, I think this is one of the darkest days for the United States Senate since the McCarthy hearings that occurred back in the 50s. You may recall the comments of one of the lawyers who said, I never really gauged your cruelty or recklessness before today, and asked Senator McCarthy, have you no sense of decency? I think this process has been cruel and reckless and indecent for both Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh. And it did not have to be that way. When we learned yesterday from Dr. Ford that she did not authorize the release of the letter of July 30 that she sent to Senator Feinstein, she did not authorize it. She did not want it leaked, but it was leaked. And she said the only people that had possession of it were her lawyers, Senator Feinstein, and Representative Eshoo. You can reach your own conclusion, but the letter had to come from somewhere. And when she testified that she was not informed of Chairman Grassley's offer to travel where she was to interview her with bipartisan participation about her claims, she said it wasn't clear to her that offer had ever been made. So when the letter was leaked by somebody, when the offer to interview her before a bipartisan panel of investigators at a place and time of her choosing out of the public eye, when that was not communicated, it sure looks to me, at least the circumstantial evidence would seem to point to the desire to have exactly what we had yesterday and to contribute to what has been described as accurately as a circus atmosphere. Cruel, reckless, no sense of decency. I would point to the fact that Judge Kavanaugh said as long as this nomination has been pending, you've seen a trend toward more and more scurrilous, salacious, and uncorroborated allegations being made against him, all of which the chairman and the committee professional staff have attempted to investigate. We heard from Dr. Ford. We also saw a claim by Ms. Ramirez that was uncorroborated by the dozens of witnesses that allegedly existed that the New York Times could not confirm. Nobody would confirm her allegation. And then yesterday, the ranking member quoted from some of the claims of Ms. Swetnick, represented by Mr. Avenatti. And I was struck by the fact that some of the allegations made in the statement by Ms. Swetnick we got on September the 25th, 2018, accused Mark Judge and Brett Kavanaugh to gang rape high school girls at a time when Ms. Swetnick was in college and says she went back to parties in high school where girls were gang raped, not on one occasion, not on two occasions. She said she went to 10 such parties. I'm shocked that our colleagues would embrace this kind of uncorroborated, outrageous, salacious allegation, considering the facts and the timing and the representation by Stormy Daniels' lawyer, obviously eager for more public attention and notoriety. But you didn't hear that in the quote from the ranking member yesterday when she quoted from some of the allegations made by Ms. Swetnick. Our friend, the ranking member, said yesterday that the integrity of the Senate is on trial. I agree with that. And we're failing badly. Cruelty, recklessness, indecency toward the people we should be treating with respect and dignity. That extends to Mark Judge. Isn't it obvious what is happening here with Mark Judge? He has submitted a statement under penalty of felony saying that Brett Kavanaugh and I were friends in high school, but we've not spoken for several years. I do not recall the events described by Dr. Ford in her testimony before the United States Senate Judiciary Committee today. He submitted that statement yesterday. He said, I never saw Brett act in the manner Dr. Ford describes. I am knowingly submitting this letter under penalty of felony. So he says he has nothing more to offer. He submitted his statement under penalty of felony, but here's the other part. He admits to be a recovering alcoholic, as well as a cancer survivor. He said he struggles with depression and anxiety, so much that he avoids public speaking. And our colleagues across the aisle believe that the appropriate course of conduct is to drag Mr. Judge into this circus-like atmosphere and to subject his battle with alcoholism and addiction to public investigation and scrutiny and ridicule. That is cruel. That is reckless. That is indecent. So, Mr. Chairman, in conclusion, I believe this is a calculated effort to delay the vote. I think the evidence all points to that. And the longer we go without voting, it's clear to me that people like Mr. Avenatti and others eager to get attention and willing to peddle the most salacious, uncorroborated, outrageous allegations against this nominee, that we'll continue to see more of the same. It's well known that about 150 nominations are pending on the Senate calendar. If there's been one thing that's been the hallmark of our colleagues' conduct across the aisle during the time of the Trump administration, it's to obstruct, delay, and deny this administration the benefit of the nominees which they have sent to the Senate for advice and consent. That includes not only judges, but all aspects of the federal government. 150 nominations pending on the Senate calendar because even with uncontroversial nominees, they want to obstruct, delay, and deny this administration the benefit of the people they've chosen to help govern. So it strikes me as entirely consistent with what we have seen on this nomination. And I think it's disgraceful, as Senator Hatch said yesterday. I think the way Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh have been treated is a scandal, and it is cruel, reckless, and indecent.
Senator Whitehouse.